Good evening. This week we begin Parshat Re'eh, and one of the mitzvot in Parshat Re'eh is the mitzvah of the Ma'aser Sheni, of the second tithe. When a person has agricultural produce, you are firstly supposed to give a gift to the Kohanim, the priests, secondly, tithe 10% to the Leviim, the Levites, and then several years out of the 7-year cycle, you give a second 10% to, you take it yourself really, and you go up to Jerusalem and eat this food, this second tithe in Jerusalem, and you're supposed to share it with those who don't have and enjoy it there in Jerusalem in the presence of Hashem. But the Torah says, what if it's too difficult to schlep all of this produce all the way to Yerushalayim? So the Torah says in chapter 14, verse 24, "V'chir be'mimcha haderech," when the road is too much for you, "ki lo tuchal se'ito," that you are not able to carry it, "ki yirchak mimcha hamakom asher yivchar Hashem Elokecha," because the place that Hashem has chosen is too far from you. Then the Torah goes on to say, if that's the case, what you do is you swap your produce for its monetary value, essentially. You take that money to Jerusalem and you buy food there in Jerusalem. Enjoy it, you only have to carry the money, not the wagon loads of produce. But the Maggid of Dubno reads this verse a little differently, because he's bothered by a question. How can it be too much to carry your produce to Jerusalem to do a mitzvah? How can any mitzvah be too much? How can we feel that it's too difficult for us? The Zohar says that I saw this quoted in the Sefer Charedim, book by Rabbi Elazar Zikri. He says that every mitzvah that we have is a precious gift that's given from Hashem. It's a gift that we should rejoice in. So how is it possible that we feel the mitzvah is too much? So he says that's also what the verse is telling you. Ki lo tuchal se'ato, when you are not able to carry it, ki yirchak mimcha hamakom, because hamakom is far from you. Hamakom is another name for Hashem. Hamakom means the place. So on a simple level, the verse means the place, Jerusalem, is too far. But on a deeper level, the verse means Hashem, who is the place of all of reality. Hashem does not exist within reality. Reality exists within Hashem. Hashem is the place that holds everything that happens. When Hashem is too far from you, that's when you won't be able to carry it. If we're feeling close enough, if we are close enough to Hashem, we'll be so inspired and enthused with such joy, we'll be able to carry it. The Maggid of Dubno gives the example. He says, imagine you were carrying a bag of diamonds. He says, would you become exhausted through it? You wouldn't. If you knew that they were diamonds and you knew how precious they were, you would carry it with a joy and a love. It's only when you feel that they are worthless stones that it becomes very difficult to carry them. So that's the first idea here, is that our distance from Hashem can make all of the mitzvot seem like a burden, but they shouldn't be. They should be a great privilege and a pleasure. And the question then is, how do we put ourselves in that state? How do we bring ourselves closer to Hashem so that we will feel that love and that inspiration? I spoke about the mitzvah of loving God a few weeks ago, and I'd like to explore that theme a little more with a quote from the Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvot. In Mitzvah Asay Gimel, in the positive mitzvah number 3, the mitzvah of loving God, this is what he says. Hi shetzivanu ba'avato yit'aleh. This is where we were commanded to love Hashem, may He be glorified. V'zeh shenachshov v'nitbonein. How do we come to this mitzvah of loving God? Through thinking about and contemplating b'mitzvotav, His mitzvot, uv'ma'amarav, and His sayings, u'fu'ulatav, and His actions. Ad shenasigehu, until we understand Him. We're commanded to learn the Torah, the mitzvahs, the statements, the actions of God, until we understand God. V'neheneh b'hasagato b'tachlit ha'hana'ah. And we will enjoy this understanding with the greatest possible enjoyment. V'zoti ha'ava ha'mechiyevet. And this is the love in which we are all obligated. In other words, it's not just something that we're commanded to do, but that's something that's open to every single one of us. You will come to love God through studying God in the Torah. Why? The Rambam says, because that is how you get to know God. When you get to know, the more you get to know God, the more you love God. I'll just give you a couple of examples. We read in the beginning of the Torah, Hashem creates the entire world. Hashem gives Adam and Eve a commandment not to eat from the tree. We know they eat from the tree. Hashem then gives them the opportunity to take responsibility for their actions. Adam, what did you do? What does he say? Hashem, it was the woman that you gave me who made me eat from the tree. It's your fault, Hashem, it's not me. The great kindness that Hashem gives him a wife so he won't be alone. He blames her, he blames Hashem, instead of taking responsibility for himself. So Hashem turns to Eve. Why did you do it? She says, no, the serpent made me. Nobody's prepared to take responsibility. They couldn't have messed up worse. They get one mitzvah, they destroy it. Hashem gives them the opportunity to redeem themselves, they turn it down. Hashem, so to speak, has no choice but to exile them from the Garden of Eden. And yet, even at that time of their degradation, even after Hashem has every reason to be disappointed in them, he still shows them his love, and he still shows them how much he believes in them by giving them clothes, by making clothes for them. Hashem gives them these garments to clothe them as they enter into the world, to say, no matter how harshly I've had to treat you, I want you to know that I still love you. The Gemara in Sotah says, we see from here that the Torah begins with chesed, with kindness. The very end of the Torah, last thing we see Hashem does is the death. We see him dealing with the death of Moshe. Moshe, the great prophet, treasured servant of Hashem, passes away, and he needs to be buried. The only problem is that no one is allowed to know where he's buried, so no one's allowed to bury him. So what's going to happen? Is Moshe's body just going to be left there? Now Hashem says, I myself will take care of the burial. Now surely that's beneath the glory of the great king, of the great creator, to involve himself with a dead body. Hashem says, I don't mind. I love Moshe, I love all of my creations, and I show that love through being prepared to bury the dead. And the Gemara concludes as well, the Torah ends with kindness. The Torah begins with kindness, the Torah ends with kindness, to show you that the entire Torah is kindness. Hashem is all about love and kindness. But if you study Hashem, you just should be filled with such respect. The way in which Hashem deals with everything, the kindness of Hashem, the strength of Hashem. How Hashem is not willing to back down when his treasured people whom he loves want to do the wrong thing. Hashem doesn't let them get away with it. We often see, unfortunately, with parents that they're just not prepared to deal with the trouble of having to reprimand or rebuke their children. They just can't deal with the effort involved in discipline. Hashem's not like Hashem's willing to pay the price in order to do what is best for the children, not what is most convenient or what would be easiest for him. We see the integrity of Hashem. We see the honesty of Hashem. We see Hashem's love of peace. When Sarah says, how am I going to have children? I'm so old and my husband's so old. Hashem, when discussing this with Avraham, doesn't mention that she said that Avraham was old. She said she's so old. Hashem doesn't want to cause any trouble between a man and his wife. The mitzvot of Hashem are so good and so pure. Do not take revenge. Do not bear a grudge. Now it's true that there are difficult parts of the Torah as well. There are times that we see Hashem coming across very strongly. But I think if you look at those in context, that's also a great lesson. How do you deal with difficult children? How do you deal with difficult children? Sometimes you have to be very firm. How do you deal with a difficult nation who simply is not understanding the lessons that you're trying to teach them and is not willing to take the goodness? Sometimes you have to be firm. But the more we see of the way in which Hashem behaves, the mitzvot that Hashem gives us, the things that Hashem says, if we look at that as ways to get to know God, we'll be filled with a greater love and respect for Hashem. Now the truth is, you have a lot of people who believe that they love God or feel the love towards God without really knowing God. But I challenge that. Because how can you love somebody that you don't know? We talk about love at first sight. Two people fall in love across a room. Who are they loving? What are they loving? They don't know one another. They're loving the idea that they have of the other person. That's not the point. That's not the other person. To love the idea, the fantasy of who you would like that person to be, is not the love of that person. You can only love somebody in proportion to the extent that you know them. When you really know somebody and you love them, that's love. When it comes to our love for God, it's not about just being excited and fiery and passionate. It's all of those things, but it doesn't start there. It starts with knowing God, with understanding God, with seeing God in the world, with seeing God in your life, and getting an understanding of the wonderful, incredible nature of Hashem. And please God, we should all be able to develop that. Have a wonderful Shabbos.